Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Planetarium show. My name is Jessica. I'm the director of the Planetarium, and as our voice in the sky is Eli, one of the students who works at the Planetarium, and I'll let him say hi.
Hello.
So tonight, since it is beginning of the month, we are doing our August constellation show, where we'll take a look at the stars and constellations that are up this month, some of the stories behind them, and tips and tricks to help you find them yourself. As always, for any of our shows, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to leave them down in the comments. Eli's going to keep an eye on that for me. Will let me know as questions come up. We'll also have time at the end for questions as well. All right. So let me get us situated. And myself, there we go. So for anyone who hasn't joined us for any of our live stream constellation shows, we use this program called Stellarium, which is basically like a planetarium on your computer. You put in your location, date, and time, and it shows you what the sky looks like. It is free, so if you want to download it for yourself and play around with it, you can find a link in the video description. So I have it set up for us here in Duluth, and since that is where the planetarium is located. For people who are not in Duluth, as long as you're in the northern hemisphere, things are going to look pretty similar. You may not have stars quite as high in the sky, or maybe a little higher, depending on exactly where you are. But you can always, again, download this for yourself and see exactly what things look like for locations other than Duluth. So it is also set for right now, and the sun is still up right now. So we're going to need to fast forward time a little bit, and we will see the sun there setting down in the west. Fast forward a little bit faster. Before the sun is fully set there in the west, we see one bright object start peeking out pretty soon after the sun sets. That is actually the planet Venus. So that is visible out in the western sky just after sunset. And then I'm going to turn us over to the east as we speed up time again. And right after sunset, coming up in the east, is another very bright star-like object. That is actually the planet Jupiter. And then right next to it, which looks brighter than it actually is in this program, you do need it to be a little bit darker for this, you can also see Saturn. So we've got 3 planets that we can see right around sunset. Just at sunset, we have Venus, which is now set. And then a little bit after that, over in the east, we have Jupiter and Saturn. All right, well, I'm going to let time keep going a little bit more, just to really let the sun set. We'll go to about 10 o'clock. And we'll go ahead and stop it there. So a little bit before 10, letting the sky get pretty dark out there. We're seeing here some fairly dark skies, so this would not be what you would see in a city. This would be outside of the city. With clear, dark skies, you can see a couple thousand stars. Planets, obviously, we also have this dusty arch kind of lane across the sky. That is actually our Milky Way galaxy that we live in. Since our galaxy is shaped like a disk, and we are located about halfway between the center and the edge inside of that disk, we see all of this light from the stars within the disk of the galaxy, but since we're in it, it makes more of kind of like an arch across the sky. All right, well, let's turn to the north. And so we're going to start our constellation hopping with some stars and constellations in the north. We're starting with these because they are up pretty much all year round. And so they're a really good place to start, since you will always be able to find them, to kind of locate and kind of get a home base in the sky. And then we'll teach you how you can kind of use those constellations to hop around and find some others. So to start with, we have what's probably the most familiar group of stars in the north, are these 7 bright stars here, which are the Big Dipper. We have the handle and then the cup of the Big Dipper. So you'll notice I didn't call this a constellation, I said group of stars, and that's because the Big Dipper is not a constellation. It's what we call an asterism. It's a smaller grouping of stars within a larger constellation. So in this case, the 7 stars of the Big Dipper are the 7 brightest stars in the Greek constellation of Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. And so to see the bear, the handle is actually going to become the tail of the bear. And we have the back, ear, nose, chest, front legs, belly, and back legs. And that is our Big Bear, Ursa Major. Now, since we have a big bear, that obviously means we must have a little bear as well, otherwise we just call it the bear. And so to find the little bear, we're actually going to use these front 2 stars in the cup of the Big Dipper. These are sometimes called the pointer stars, because if you connect them in a line and follow that line to this next bright star here, they point you to Polaris, also known as the North Star. And Polaris is the end of the tail, or the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. And so we have the handle and the cup. Now, if you've ever gone out and tried to find the Little Dipper for yourself and you weren't able to, totally not your fault. You can see here that 4 of these 7 stars are incredibly dim. So unless you are in very, very dark skies, you're probably not going to see the entire Little Dipper. At most, you'll see these 2 and Polaris. But our Little Dipper here is also Ursa Minor, our little bear. So we have a long bear tail, and then back legs, body, front legs, and head. Definitely more akin to like a squirrel than a bear. And there's a running joke that, the Greeks obviously must have not known what bears looked like in order for our bears here to have such long tails. But there is actually a story to explain it. So, as with most Greek stories, this one starts with Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. He was on Earth. He had a bad habit of sneaking away to Earth and going to different parties at different villages and stuff. And his wife, Hera, the queen of the Greek gods, didn't like him always sneaking off. But that's what happened. He snuck off once again to this town that was having a celebration. He ended up meeting a woman named Callisto, and they kind of became friends. Hera, though, tracks him down to drag him back up to Mount Olympus and decides to punish him this time by turning his new friend Callisto into a bear. And so she does that, drags Zeus off. What they don't know is that Callisto actually has a son named Arcturus. And so Arcturus, realizing that, he hasn't seen his mom in a while, goes out trying to search for her. And while in the woods, came across this big, beautiful bear that he didn't realize was actually his mom. And of course, he draws his bow, getting ready to defend himself. Zeus had snuck back out again and come down to kind of check on Callisto and see, how she was doing in her new bear life, saw what was about to happen. And since he couldn't undo Hera's curse on Callisto, he couldn't turn her back human, what he decided to do was turn Arcturus into a bear as well. And then to make it up to them, he decided to kind of turn them into stars, to put them up in the sky so that they live together as bears. And to get them up there, he had to pick them up by their bear tails, spin them around, and fling them up into the sky. And that process of being spun and flung is what stretched out those bear tails here. So there is a reason for the bears to have such long tails. All right. So, moving on, the next constellation that we're going to find, we're going to again use those front two stars of the Big Dipper, the pointer stars. But this time we're going to go past Polaris into the Milky Way, where we find this big W in the sky. To the Greeks, this W is the Queen Cassiopeia. And it's you kind of have to use your imagination to get a queen out of a W. We kind of picture her as if she's sitting in her throne and we're getting kind of a profile view. So we have her head, body, upper legs, lower legs, and big long feet. I think some of the other cultural constellations make a lot more sense for this. My personal favorite is, I believe, a Persian constellation where they see this as the two humps of a camel. And that just makes a whole lot more sense to me. There's also, I believe it's the Sami. These are the antlers of a caribou, which again makes a lot more sense. So yeah, there is our Queen Cassiopeia. All right, from here, we can actually do a little bit more star hopping, although it's not really star hopping so much, because what we're going to do is take this right V of the W and use that as an arrow to point us to this fuzzy little blob here. And if I zoom in to this fuzzy little blob, we see that this is actually a galaxy. This is the Andromeda Galaxy, the closest galaxy to us at about 2.5 million light years. But what's amazing about this is you really can see this with your naked eye. You do not have to have a telescope. As long as you have dark skies and you follow that V of Cassiopeia, it'll point you right to it. In fact, it is the only thing that we can see in our nighttime sky without a telescope that is not within our galaxy. I probably said that completely backwards. It's the only other galaxy that we can see without a telescope, with just your naked eye. You can see that, just a fuzzy little blob. Of course, with the telescope, you'll zoom in and see more detail, but it's just kind of crazy that you can see a whole other galaxy there with just your eyes. I know it's one of Eli's favorites.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to head over now, over to the east, where again we have Jupiter and Saturn currently up. If you look through a telescope at them, with Jupiter, depending on how good your telescope is, you may actually be able to see the stripes. Let me pause time for a second so it stops moving. You can see the stripes. You can even see the great red spot if it's facing towards us, which it looks like tonight it is. But then you'll also see these 4 points of light on either side, and those are actually the 4 largest moons around Jupiter, known as the Galilean Moons, because Galileo was the first to discover them. And you can see these through a telescope. There'll be just these little 4 points of light on either side of Jupiter. And then with Saturn here, if you have a telescope, trying to zoom in well, you can make out those rings around Saturn. And sometimes you can even see some of its moons as well. All right, now if you're interested in seeing those for yourself, then you should come out to one of our star parties next week, but I'll talk more about that at the end of our show. All right, so back to the stars. Up in the east during the summer, and kind of high overhead now, later in the summer, we can see this triangle made of 3 bright stars. These 3 stars make up the summer triangle, because it's a triangle that's up during the summer. Makes sense. These 3 stars are Vega, Altair, and Deneb. Vega is the brightest star in Lyra the harp. The way I see the harp is kind of like we have the harp body, like the frame, and then the strings go this way. I know this program draws it differently and only uses these stars, which don't really look like a harp to me, but okay. Again, you kind of have to use your imagination with some of these. They don't always look like they're quote-unquote supposed to. And then Altair here is the brightest star in Akilah the Eagle, which I see this teardrop as the body of the eagle. And then we have some wings and some talons. This draws it a little bit differently than I see it. Again, everyone kind of has their own version of how these constellations, how you make these pictures out of these stars. So Lyra and Akilah are in a story together. And so this story actually starts with a man named Orpheus, who was a very talented harp player, his harp, Lyra. So Orpheus is well known, beloved for his harp playing. Even the gods and goddesses love to have him at their little shindigs to play for them. Unfortunately, though, one day his wife passes away, and he is devastated by this, obviously. But all of the ladies in town are pretty excited because now Orpheus is back on the market, or so they think. Well, they decide to give him an appropriate amount of time to mourn, which they decided was a week, and then approach him, basically telling him, hey, you have to marry one of us. And it's been a week. He's not over his wife. He's still very much in love with her, not wanting to get remarried. They do not take this well and lash out at him and end up killing him and chopping his body into pieces and spreading those pieces all over the lands. And then they threw his harp into the river. Well, once Zeus found out what happened, he was heartbroken over this, and decided to send his giant eagle, Akilah, down to fetch the harp out of the river. So we have the river and the harp. And then he placed all of them up in the sky, the harp and Akilah. The harp to honor Orpheus and the talents that he had, and then Akilah for its help. Akilah is also involved in some other stories as well. It's always around and kind of helping Zeus out. So the last star in our summer triangle here is Deneb. This is the kind of tail feathers of the constellation Cygnus the Swan. So we have the feathers, wing, and long swan neck here. And this is Cygnus the Swan. And while Deneb is the brightest star, the most interesting star in Cygnus is actually the kind of tip of its nose. This is a star called Alberio, which to our naked eye looks like a single star, but if you look at it through a telescope, you see that it is actually two stars. It's a binary system. And not only is it two stars, but you can't see it super well in this program, but these two stars are actually two very different colors, one being more of a kind of blue-white, and the other being a really kind of goldish orange color. And they're very, very stark contrast. You can really tell the difference. Again, this program doesn't show it super well, but it's a fun thing to kind of look at through a telescope. All right, now the Greek story of Cygnus the Swan is frankly not family friendly. So there's another story that we like to tell that uses these stars but comes from the Shoshone Native American tribe. So instead of seeing a swan here, and let me actually just take these away. Instead of seeing a swan, they see these group of stars as a little bear. And so here we have a little dumpy bear tail, the back of the bear. Here is its head and its nose. Kind of think like its neck is outstretched and it's kind of sniffing the air. The chest, front leg, belly, and back leg and back up to its little nubby bear tail. So this is the Shoshone Bear. So the story of this bear is it was quite a curious bear and decided to climb to the tip top of the tallest mountain that it could find. And when he got up there, he slipped and he fell and he started rolling down the mountain. And as he's rolling, the snow is just sticking to his fur. And the more he rolls, the more snow sticks, and he ends up growing into this giant snowball that's just coming barreling down the mountainside. And by the time he reaches the bottom, he's going so fast that he can't stop. And what he ends up doing is rolling right up the next mountain and getting launched into the sky, where he ended up going splat right here in the nighttime sky. And then left behind this trail of snow across the sky with him. So that's how they explained that kind of fuzzy path of the Milky Way as this trail of snow as this bear got launched into the sky and went splat in the sky. It's a really cute one that I like. All right, well, let's turn our attention over to the south. Summertime in the south is a really beautiful view of our galaxy. Because this is actually us looking towards the very center of our galaxy, where there is a lot of stars and gas and dust. And so you get a really nice view, bright view, lots of gas clouds and stars, and it's the best view of the Milky Way since we're looking like right into the heart of our galaxy. But kind of straddling on either side of the Milky Way are a couple of other constellations. We'll start on the right. You can see this really red star here. That is Antares, right? Yes. Which is kind of the heart of Scorpio, the Scorpion. So we have kind of his head and his little pinchers coming off here, and then his body, and then his tail stretches actually below the equator for us here further north in Minnesota. The further south you get, the higher this is in the sky, and you can actually see the full tail. And so this is Scorpio here. And again, that tail. If I get rid of the ground for just a second, we can see that kind of hook of the tail. And for anyone who has seen the movie Moana, you may remember that she learns to navigate the ocean by following Maui's hook in the sky. Well, that's a real constellation and a real thing that the Polynesians use to navigate. And Maui's hook is what they see instead of the curly tail of Scorpio. This is Maui's hook to the Polynesians. All right, we'll turn our ground back on. Now, to the left of the Milky Way, we see an interesting set of stars that most people identify as the teapot. And I think that makes sense, right? We have kind of the body of the teapot, handle, top, and then the spout, and then the Milky Way is almost like steam coming out of the teapot. But this is supposed to be, to the Greeks, the constellation of Sagittarius, who is half man, half horse. He's a centaur. I don't quite understand how you get a centaur from a teapot. Again, you have to use a lot of imagination for some of these constellations. All right. So looking over to the west now, we have some of our spring constellations that are getting pretty low in the sky since we are into summer. But the one that I want to show you, we actually get to by, again, using the Big Dipper to help us. Now remember before, we used the pointer stars to find Polaris and the Little Dipper, and to find our W of Cassiopeia. This time what we're going to do is follow the arch of the handle. And so we're going to follow that arc to this bright star here, known as Arcturus. And so we arc to Arcturus. Arcturus is the brightest star in the Greek constellation of Bootes. It kind of looks like an ice cream cone, right? Um, the way they draw it, you can kind of see that this is supposed to be a guy. So like maybe we have like his body and then legs. But to the Greeks, Bootes is the bear herder who is herding our big and little bear across the sky. But the star Arcturus actually has a really great story that comes from, I believe, the Lumi Native American tribe, and is about Coyote. So Coyote is usually seen as this mischievous figure. And one day, Coyote comes across this group of pretty ladies who he decides he must impress somehow, and does so by popping his eyes out of his head and starting to juggle them. And to impress them more, he throws them higher and higher and higher until eventually he throws one of his eyeballs so high that it lands smack dab right here in the sky, and now he's left with only one eyeball. So Arcturus is Coyote's eyeball. All right. I think those are the most notable and brightest constellations that are up this time of year. If you are a night owl who stays up really late, you will start to see some winter constellations coming up in the east pretty late at night because, well, winter is coming eventually. But yeah, and then we have our sun rising up in the east. All right, and that is our August constellation show. Eli, do we have any questions?
We actually didn't get any questions. I wanted to ask though, because for some reason, whenever I would look at Bootes, I would always think it was supposed to like resemble like the sled that Ursa
Oh,
Major.
interesting. Okay.
I always thought it like almost like a toboggan type shape.
Yeah.
That's what I always thought it was. Is it actually supposed to be like a guy?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a guy. Boates
Oh,
is the bear herder.
I thought it was like supposed to be his like sled, or like his like
I
carriage.
again, there are so many different iterations of what people see and how they've kind of forced pictures into the sky.
Right.
I mean, you know better than anyone the square of Pegasus.
Yeah. Pretty
That
funny.
yeah, we can't always rely on the constellations looking exactly like they're supposed to, quote
Nope.
unquote. So yeah, um, but I think his sled makes sense. Just like Auriga, some people like we see it as his chariot, but some people actually see it as him.
Yeah. Yep.
But I think seeing it as his chariot makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. We will hang out for a few more minutes to see if there are any questions that come up. In the meantime, let me tell you about next week. So next week is our Dark Sky Caravan. On Monday and Tuesday next week, we will be right here on our Facebook page for a couple of virtual shows, Monday and Tuesday, both at 7 p.m. Central. And then Wednesday through Saturday, we will be out having star parties at different locations. So Wednesday, we'll be here in Duluth. We'll actually be up outside the planetarium. Thursday, we'll be at Tetagooch State Park. Friday, we'll be in Grand Marais at North House Folk School. And on Saturday, we will be up at the end of the Gunflint Trail at the Chippewa Museum and Nature Center. And we're ending there because those are like the darkest skies. And it's going to be amazing. We're also doing it next week because that is during the peak of the Perseid meteor shower, which is also going to be fantastic to see because we're not going to have any interference from moonlight. So it should be a spectacular view. And yeah, so if you are going to be in any of those areas or want to just come out, We will be at those locations. We will have our telescope set up. We will not be doing eyepiece viewing. We'll have a camera and a screen set up, just because we don't want to risk a bunch of people sharing telescope eyepieces right now. But you still get to see what it looks like through the telescope. I think it's still going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll also be there with our little laser pointers, kind of giving live tours of the stars and constellations. Um, and yeah, we're excited to be going out. It's been a long time since we've done anything like this.
Yeah, we finally get to stretch our legs and leave the planetarium office.
I know. We'll also be doing for our Duluth night. We will be doing some short shows in the planetarium itself as well.
Yeah.
We are limited to 13 people at a time. So we'll be taking in small groups roughly every 20 minutes or so, and trying to just do some live shows for you guys while we're out. So yeah, that's next week. Dark Sky Caravan, it's here already. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
The summer is going by way too fast. But yeah, all right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. Are you, Eli?
Nope, I got nothing.
All right. Well, we will wrap it up there then. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. We hope to see you either here for our virtual shows or out at our star parties next week. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.